Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So today we are looking at a number of different cards from various themes and archetypes that are currently spiking in price. The Create a Card poll has given us an idea of what different archetypes Konami is potentially looking at giving us some support for. Even though we are now down to just Inzektors and Photons, it feels kind of inevitable that some of those other archetypes in the poll that didn't necessarily win will still be getting some sort of support in the near future, because the fact that they got as many votes and got as far as they did shows that they are still archetypes that are loved by the player base. Therefore, it is important to pay attention to key cards from those archetypes as well, because we can buy and hold on to those key cards early before the support is announced and before those cards spike in price even further. Let's get started. So first up, we're going to take a look at the two archetypes that are actually in the final of the poll right now. Starting off with Inzektors. So for those of you who don't know, Inzektors used to be a tier 0.5 to tier 1 deck where you could summon Inzektors out of the deck with your Dragonflies. Hornet was a really key card in the strategy because it allowed you to pop itself every time it was equipped to destroy an opponent's card. So you could use it to blow up basically your opponent's entire field really quickly. It should come as no surprise then that Inzektor Hornet, being a super rare from Order of Chaos with just one printing, has climbed in price considerably and now sits up at the $13 mark. Now obviously a big question about Inzektors is how they are going to adapt to the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is played now. Hornet was a really annoying card because it allowed you to tear boards apart, but now with all of the emphasis on going first and setting up a board, I don't know if we're even going to be able to abuse Hornet anymore. I guess it does depend on the new support, or you could use like Dark Ruler No More first and then blow everything up, but that really does depend. Either way, I do think that regardless of the support, if Inzektors win, then a Hornet reprint would be pretty inevitable, and because Hornet has only the one printing and it's just a super rare, a reprint would basically bring the original down to being like a $3 card or so. That being said, I think that you should be looking for an opportunity to sell Hornet fairly soon, either immediately after the poll ends or very soon after that support is announced, because regardless of what or when it is, we should expect Hornet's price to plummet soon after. The other card that I want to look at here is Inzektor Sword Zect Caliber. So Zect Caliber is similar to Hornet in that it just has the one printing, and it was a pretty useful card in Inzektors. Rather than popping things, this lets you add an Inzektor monster from your graveyard to your hand when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, and this is not a hard once per turn effect. I believe that this is something that was played at 2 back when Inzektors were big. Anyways, we are now looking at $10 a piece for the ultra rares, or around $20 a piece for the ultimate rares, which is quite a bit given that we don't know what any of the support is yet still. Now, I feel like this card is a bit different from Hornet. Unlike Hornet, I feel like with the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is played now, this card could still be really useful, helping to add back a combo piece or supporting some sort of loop. And also this card is available as an ultimate rare, which isn't going to tank as much in price if this card were reprinted because it's in a much higher, nicer rarity. Now that being said, the Ultras are still definitely a move for me. I wouldn't want to hold on to those for the same reasons as Hornet, right? But with the Ultimate Rares, I think that you can be a little bit more flexible in terms of holding on to them, since there just won't be as much of a quantity available on the market, and if they do spike in price, they are going to stay up there for a bit longer than the Ultra Rares would. Regardless, if you can sell them at an inflated price, I would still take it as long as there's that uncertainty around the new Inzektor support, where we don't know what the cards do, or if Zect Caliber will still be a useful card for the archetype. Now on the other side of the poll, we have number 90 Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. So Photons are a deck that I think are really strong, even without the support from the poll, and if they win, I think they're definitely a deck that you need to watch out for. The deck can set up pretty scary boards with multiple negates, and it's even resilient enough to play through some hand traps. Number 90 is a card that has made its way into some decks in the past as a generic rank 8 that provides monster effect negation for decks like Blue Eyes or Grand Maju, but this card actually gets even stronger if it has a Photon card as an Xyz material, which makes it so that the card can't be destroyed by card effects. It also has another quick effect where you can attach a Photon or Galaxy card from your deck to this card as an Xyz material, which is kind of nice as well. So of all the cards from the Photon/Galaxy archetype, I feel like number 90 is the most logical one to look towards. Aside from something crazy like Ghost Rare Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon, number 90 does just have the one printing available, it's very good, and it also has generic applications as well. However, this card came out 2 years ago in Battles of Legend Relentless Revenge, a set where other cards such as Golden Castle of Stromberg and Cyber Emergency have already seen reprints, so a reprint for number 90 might definitely be coming soon. I would therefore be a bit hesitant to pick this card up at its current market price of $15. Definitely don't invest in too many copies of this card at this price. It's a card that I want to have in my trade binder ready to offload, probably as soon as the pull is over or as soon as any sort of Photon Galaxy support is announced, because a reprint is fairly certain to follow within the next 6 months or so either way. So yeah, as great of a card as number 90 is for the Photon archetype, it's a card that you have to be a bit careful with if you have it, and just try to be a bit mindful of how that upcoming reprint could affect this card's price. Okay, so one of the archetypes that I want to look at that only made it to the top 4 is X-Sabers. So this is a really old archetype. I think it's Oscar's favorite archetype in the game, for those of you that remember him. Their peak was actually before I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, so I don't have too much of a memory of them. The one thing I do know about the archetype is that you can actually use all tuner monsters to make Gotems, which is kind of funny. Anyways, there are a few cards from the archetype that have jumped because of this pull, such as Turbo Pack Super Rare Pashules and Ultra Rare Bogart Knights, but we are going to look at Hyunlei, a synchro monster from Absolute Power Force that only has the one printing. For this card, we are looking at $12 for the Ultra Rare and $30 lowest for the Ultimate Rare on TCG Player at the moment, which is quite a bit. Now this does require the non-tuner monster to be an X-Saber, so it's not like this card is going to be splashed into every single strategy, but when this card is synchro summoned, you get to pop up to 3 Speller Trap cards on the field, which is really cool. Right, maybe not the greatest against like Dragon Link or something like that, but against a more control-oriented deck like Subterror, Altergeist, or Dogmatica Invoked, it could be a very useful card. In reality though, as cool as this card looks, I think it will just end up being a one-of tech in X-Sabers if they use it at all, maybe even just as a side deck card, since any really good X-Saber support coming in the future will probably revolve around looping your opponent's hand with Gotems, just based on the way that Yu-Gi-Oh is played nowadays. But yeah, this card was pretty cheap for quite some time, like $5 for the Ultra and then maybe 10ish for the Ultimate Rare, but with all of the hype around supporting old archetypes and strategies, it's one of those cards that has climbed up in price very steadily over time. Probably something that I would try to maybe hold on to just the one copy of if you're a really big fan of X-Sabers and want to play the deck in the future, and then try to find a way to offload your extra copies before any sort of reprint is announced. Alright, next up, let's take a look at Psyframe Lord Lambda. So we're not necessarily looking at Psyframes in this section, but I still want to look at Lambda because it is a card that has gotten some hype over the last week or so. I believe that the Kali Effect actually talked about this card in his discussion about cards that you should buy before they skyrocket in price, and as much as I love that series and the work that the Kali Effect does, I'm going to have to disagree with this particular point. At first glance, you might think that Lambda is just underutilized at the moment and that it could see its way into more and more strategies, especially given that Gamma is a card that is seeing a ton of competitive play at the moment. However, I do think that Lambda just isn't a strong enough card at the moment to justify a spot in the extra deck, especially where we're seeing such tight space in decks like Dragon Link and Infernoble Knights. For Link 2s, we really just have Isolde, Verte Anaconda, and Halki Fibrax, and then occasionally we'll see something like a Barricade Borg Blocker or an IP Masquerena. In fact, the only deck that's meta that I could really see using Lambda that has the space for it is something like Dinosaurs, where it would just end up as banish fodder for Pot of Extravagance anyways. Even though it could be a good option, I just don't think it's worth the extra deck space given the other cards that you need to have available, and I think that this is supported by the fact that in all of the top deck lists that we've seen from online events and whatnot, Lambda hasn't made its way into a single list. On top of that, Battles of Legend Heroes Revenge came out just over a year ago, and we've already seen a reprint of Almirage, so other cards from the set like Lambda and BLS Soldier of Chaos are also probably due to be reprinted within the next few months. Now, with that being said, Lambda actually has jumped in price over the last little while, from being around $8 or so to now being up at the $15 mark. However, I don't believe that this hype price is justified, and I personally think that Lambda will settle back down to around the $10 to $12 mark within the next little while, as people realize that this card just isn't really seeing any play and need to offload their extra copies. I personally would be wary of paying anything over the $10 mark for this card, and if you do happen to have any extra copies sitting around, I would look at offloading them now while the prices are a bit inflated. Another more generic card that I want to draw people's attention to is Ceravus, the Ancient and Descended. So this card, despite being a ritual monster, isn't something that I've really seen anyone ever ritual summon. Rather, it is useful because of its hand trap-like effect. Basically, you can discard it from your hand to protect your monsters from cards that target, which can be very useful to ensure that you're able to pull off certain combos. Very notably, this card has spiked over the last few days because theoretically, it can protect your monster from infinite impermanence or effect veiler. Ceravus basically becomes another form of protection to ensure that you can combo off and resolve your card's effects, especially if your turn would end if your card effect were negated. Because of this, we've actually seen a bump up in the prices of Ceravus. The original secret rares are now back up at $10 a piece, and the reprinted ultra rares, which were only 25 cents or so, are up to $2 each. Now, I'm going to caution you guys against investing too heavily in this card for now. While it may be tempting as an alternative to play, this card definitely falls out of favor with the release of Crossout Designator, which everyone is talking about being released in Blazing Vortex early next year. I think that between Crossout Designator, Triple Tactics Talons, Psyframe Gear Gamma, and the one copy of Called by the Grave, that is enough of those anti-hand trap sort of cards that Ceravus won't really be relevant again unless we see one of those previously mentioned cards hit on some sort of ban list. With that, I would definitely take advantage of the fact that Ceravus is getting attention before the release of Crossout Designator and move all of your extra copies sooner rather than later. So over in the OCG, Zoodiacs are actually one of the best decks of the format once again. In Phantom Rage, the new Tri-Brigade archetype is a Beast Warrior themed archetype that actually synergizes pretty well with the Zoodiacs, since you can banish Zoodiacs from your graveyard in order to conduct link summons with the Tri-Brigade effects. But they also get access to Double A Zeus, a new Xyz monster that is basically a free board wipe, which can be really devastating to play against. I think that a lot of people are hoping that Zoodiacs will be just as potent here in the TCG as they have been in the OCG, so people are buying a ton of Zoodiac cards in order to prepare. One of the pricier cards from the archetype is Zoodiac Chakanine, an ultra rare out of Maximum Crisis. It is currently sitting at $15 a piece, with just the one ultra rare printing available. Now, on that supposedly leaked Maximum Gold list, Chakanine was included as a potential reprint, and even if it weren't, I would strongly suspect that Chakanine were in there anyways, given all of the new indirect support coming for the Zoodiac archetype in Phantom Rage and the recent unbanning of Dryden. We don't know for sure if it will be in there, or even how the Zoodiac deck will fare here in the TCG, but it's definitely something that you guys should keep in mind. We've actually been getting a few leaks from Maximum Gold over the last few days, so that reprint could potentially be confirmed any day now. If you have extra Chakanines, or if you're okay with gambling and potentially having to play the gold rares, or potentially having to buy them back at a later date in a different version, I think that you have to look at moving your Chakanines now, because if any sort of reprint is confirmed, the card will inevitably tank in price. The final card that I want to take a look at here is Trickstar Candina. It has been a while since Trickstars were relevant, with them last seeing a ton of play as an engine in the Orca strategy, since you effectively played 6 copies of Candina so that you could make Nightmare Mermaid extremely easily and consistently. Now, Trickstars haven't been too relevant recently, though I do think that it makes a neat little engine in different decks so that you can make Verte Anaconda to go into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, there are actually 3 different things that could happen that would directly result in a jump in the price of Candina. We could see some new Trickstar support, which wouldn't be too surprising, given that the archetype is a sort of waifu archetype, and Konami knows that a lot of the player base loves it. We could see Light Stage move to 2 or 3, which might be a little bit too strong. We might have to see Red Eyes Dark Dragoon banned before that happens, but who knows? Or we could see Candina, Korabane, and Light Stage used as a splashable engine in a meta strategy once again, which is totally possible. I think that because of all of these possibilities, we've seen all the holo versions of Candina jump up in price, with the original Code of the Duelist Ultra Rares and the Starfoil Rares up at $8 each, and the Mega Pack Ultra Rares up at $5 each, which is a lot considering that the card was only $1 or $2 for quite some time. Regardless of which option ends up happening, any boost to the Trickstar strategy overall is likely to require Candina, because it's like a Stratos for the entire archetype, which is why Candina is a card that has caught a lot of people's attention. If you're okay with whatever rarity, you can pick up the common versions for just a couple of bucks, but either way, it's the kind of card that you'll want to make sure that you own a playset of for your own use, just in case it does see any sort of uptick in play. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. There are actually a ton of cards over all of the archetypes on the poll that I would like to cover, just because there's so much potential there. That might be another video for sometime next week, but it really is just so difficult to say what cards will be good for these outdated archetypes, especially when we don't know how the support will look. Even though we can assume that a deck will try and keep a similar playstyle the way it did in the past, it could be the case that it ends up being something completely different. I therefore think that the best thing that we can do is try to identify cards that will spike early on by identifying key cards from the different archetypes and then trying to capitalize on that movement before the changes happen. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's Market Watch episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me, of course, and as always, leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what else is going on with the market that maybe I didn't talk about today so that I can potentially cover it in a future video to keep all of you guys as informed as possible. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.